Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of like a precursor to the upcoming Color Spotlight Reboot with a recap of sorts, or an update of the last Color Spotlight series. The first run of the series was over a year ago, and it all started with a video that I did on the color Ultramarine, and we went through 8 different colors in the initial run. There was a bonus episode that I'll cover here as well, and I'm excited to be bringing you 8 new colors, possibly more, in the upcoming months as well. Now, the reason that I wanted to do this video was that so much has changed about my own development as an artist since that series originally started, as well as in my collection, and I have a lot more paint samples to show you. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go ahead and take a look at the previous colors from the initial run in the swatch card forms. We'll talk about all of the paint samples that I currently have in 2018 from that color, and I'll kind of give you updates on my opinions about the overall color, whether or not they're still on my palette, and which ones are my favorite brands. So if this doesn't sound like your type of video, no worries, you can just go ahead and come back later when we start the new series with our new colors, but if you would like to see an update of the previous colors, be sure to stick around. So the very first color that I recorded for this series was Ultramarine Blue, and I think I had probably half of the samples that I have now. I could organize these in a lot of different ways, but the way that I chose to kind of organize the swatches here today are kind of like the least granulating colors are on top and the most granulating colors are on the bottom. We could also do this by hue, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. The Graham and the Da Vinci are probably, without a doubt, the most vibrant, intense, and non-granulating versions of this color. So if you're a fan of the hue for Ultramarine but don't like the granulation aspect, those would be ones that I'd recommend. On the complete opposite, we've got 2 over here for Holbein and Mission Gold that are surprisingly, because those 2 brands are kind of known for not being very granulating on the whole. We've got 2 of the most granulating colors. These are also the warmest ones as well. These are the most red-leaning colors. I myself had French Ultramarine from Daniel Smith on my palette for most of my watercolor journey, but recently I switched that off for Sennelier's Ultramarine Deep, which I currently have on my main palette. I also like Da Vinci and Graham's versions just because of the richness, but the more I start appreciating granulation, the more I kind of am looking for colors that kind of fall outside of that super fine milled range, I guess. This is obviously a color that I still have on almost every palette that I create as my warm blue. It's commonly available, it's affordable, and I enjoy working with it on a regular basis, especially when mixing grays. So next up is a great compliment to Ultramarine. It was the second in this series, and it's of course Burnt Sienna. So here we're only looking at the PBR 7 version, not the PR 101. If you've been around the channel for a while, and I assume if you're watching this video that you have been, I like PR 101 as a color, but I don't think it is Burnt Sienna. So we're also only looking at Burnt Sienna with PBR 7. We're not looking at the other variations of PBR 7 like Raw Sienna or Burnt Umber or Raw Umber. So I have them here organized in order from orangest to brownest, with the exception of this guy should be over here, but it didn't quite fit on the screen that way. So our orangest variations come from Holbein and Sennelier. I don't particularly like Sennelier's version. It's very weak and doesn't glaze very well, but the Turner and the Holbein are both fairly non-granulating orange versions of this color if you do prefer the stronger orange-leaning Burnt Siennas. And then as we kind of get down in this direction, we have some of the more brown Burnt Siennas. Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna is the first Burnt Sienna that I ever had, and it's also probably one of the most unique because it has this really pinky undertone that I actually really enjoy. This was on my palette for a very, very, very long time, but similarly to the Ultramarine, I have been trying a new Burnt Sienna recently, and that is Da Vinci's Burnt Sienna over here. I tried their brand because I did like the hue of this color, and it's also really affordable and you can buy it in large tubes. So this is the one I'm trying out on my palette right now. It has kind of a moderate granulation, whereas Daniel Smith's granulates a little more heavily. But I just wanted to kind of let you know about that update. If you're not a fan of Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna, which I know a lot of people don't like this pinky undertone, they do also have an Italian Burnt Sienna, which is more on the orange side. The other two notable ones in here that I want to kind of call out for various reasons are the M. Graham's Burnt Sienna is very, very brown. I actually had a hard time telling between this color that is a viewer scent, so I just have to trust that it's the right sample, but it's very close to their burnt umber as well, so not a whole lot of variation there. I think this is the burnt sienna, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. The other one is Coors Burnt Sienna, and it's very opaque and almost chalky looking. I really like Coors bright colors, but I don't find the earth tones to be super awesome. Next up we have Quinacridone Gold, and this single pigment from Daniel Smith has now been discontinued. I do have a video on that I'll go ahead and put up here for you, so all the other brands are going to be mixes to try and emulate that color. Now I don't have too many of them, but I did want to show you the ones that I do have. Most mixes are made from PO48, which is a close cousin of PO49, and PY150. All of these mixes here are a little bit more on the orangey side. I would say probably that Holbein is the most kind of mellow version of this that's closer to the original Quinacridone Gold in terms of these mixtures, but my favorite replacement actually so far is Winsor & Newton, and I know some of you might be surprised to hear that because I'm not typically a huge fan of their paints, but their mix is the closest, the one that I have at least, to the original formula. We also have Vinci, which is just, I think, off in its own world a little bit. It's still a beautiful color, but it's definitely kind of an orangey brown, fits in more with our deeper earth tones than it does with a Quinacridone Gold. I also want to say just really quickly, I have had a lot of comments recently on my voice and my vocal fry, which I am trying to work on, but I have really bad allergies right now and my throat is bothering me, so that little gurgle raspiness that you hear is not from my lack of trying and speaking clearly here. Next up, we have PG7, which is Phthalo Green Blue shade. It can go by a variety of names. The most correct one would be Phthalo Green, but a lot of other companies call theirs Viridian or Viridian Hue, which is a separate pigment, but in this cases they are the PG7, and White Nights calls theirs Emerald Green. Now I would have thought that I would have had more samples of this, but it looks like I've done a fairly good job of not acquiring too many of these colors, even though that they are very common in a lot of starter sets and palettes that are recommended. There isn't a whole lot of variation between the hue of samples, with maybe one exception, and that is Da Vinci's Phthalo Green is a little bit greener rather than blue than the rest of the samples. There are some differences in intensity though, so we'll talk about that a little bit. I think Schmincke's is probably the weakest of the bunch in terms of its overall pigment load and glazing properties. Winsor & Newton has an okay glazing and it's vibrant, but it also has this really weird cricket. Can you come over here, please? Please don't scratch the door. I'm filming. Winsor & Newton's Phthalo Green is a little bit odd. I've had this issue in my own tube. I've had an issue with a sample someone else sent me of it, and I've heard from numerous viewers that this specific paint gets like this white film over the top of it. I don't know what it is, but it was a little concerning and weird that it only happened with their brand, so I've since switched over to using Daniel Smith's Phthalo Green Blue shade, and that's the one that lives in my main palette now, although I just got a sample of M. Graham for a swatching video that I'm hoping to do in the not so distant future, and this is a gorgeous, vibrant, clean glazing version of this color, and I'm really excited to use it in future applications for this color. Next up we have PV19, and I called this episode Quinacridone Rose in the original run of the series, but since then a lot of kind of conversation has stirred up and I have learned a lot more about this pigment and how much it can vary. So in the original run we talked kind of about this mid-region of pinks for Quinacridone Rose, but this color can actually vary all the way from a red to a purple. So I just wanted to go ahead and just like very briefly touch on the ones that I still use and like, because if I went through them point by point we'd be here forever. But I love Da Vinci's Alizarin Crimson, which is made from a PV19, but it's the reddest version I've ever seen. It's super rich and vibrant and beautiful. For my personal pick on this color, my favorite versions are Mission Golds and Da Vinci's. They have these beautiful bright, rich pinks that are still enough towards the red side to make them a little bit more versatile, in my opinion, in a mixing palette. And then as we move further down the spectrum, we have the really pink pinks from like Rembrandt and Daniel Smith, which are more true magentas, but will give you a little bit more of a limited range when it comes to mixing your oranges if you only have that as your cool red on the palette. And then we can move like squarely into purple territory. We've got a permanent red violet, which is like a really deep magenta, moving into the more purpley tones. I have to admit that I don't use these colors here very often, but I am curious about them. They do mix really beautiful, vibrant purples. You know, you can mix a whole range from them, but I don't know how much versatility they have in other applications, although I am curious to further explore this color. Long story short, kind of these two are my favorites. I mean, it could go either way here, but I really like this region of PV19. Alright, here we have PY3. This is either Hansie Yellow Light or Lemon Yellow, depending on the company. And this is a color that I started off using in my very first palette. I picked Daniel Smith's Hansie Yellow, mainly because I was building a Daniel Smith palette to start with. And at the time, I didn't realize that this is actually a pretty mid-tone yellow. I considered it as a cool yellow on my palette, but as I got more and more samples, you can see here that there are cooler versions of this color. Da Vinci and Sennelier probably have the brightest, clearest versions of this color, followed by Coors and Schmincke. And then once we get into Mission Gold, Imgram, and Daniel Smith, they have kind of these warmer mid-tone ranges. Now I have to say that I've taken this color primarily off of most of my palettes and I've replaced it with a different color, and that is PY175 from Daniel Smith. This is their version of Lemon Yellow. And if I go ahead and set this down to the other colors, you can see that this is kind of like, I don't know, maybe around the Schmincke Mission Gold region. Like, it's not quite as warm as the Daniel Smith Hansie Yellow Light, but it's not cool either. But it is super transparent, very crisp and clean, and I absolutely love it for mixing. I should also add that what spurred me moving on to a different yellow and trying this Lemon Yellow from Daniel Smith is that in addition to being really transparent, it's also very light fast, more so than the Hansie Yellow Light. So next up we have Prussian Blue. Now this is a color that you guys wanted to see on the Spotlight series. It won out over Phthalo Blue in my original run, and I had to learn a lot about this color in order to do the Spotlight on it because I didn't have much previous knowledge about it. I quickly fell in love with this color, added Imgram Prussian Blue to my main palette, and the rest was history, or so I thought. It's this beautiful, deep, warm-ish, coolish, like it hovers right in between the two depending on the brand. Like these ones are warmer, these ones are cooler. But as I started to do my own light fastness tests, I tested my main palette. I haven't tested all these samples. I've tested the Schmincke and the Imgram Prussian Blue in my window, and after just 1 month of sun exposure, it has completely and drastically faded. This has a light fastness rating of 1 from the company. I wrote them about it, and they said that they're looking into it with their supplier. I let them know my concerns. From doing research and from what you guys have also told me, Prussian Blue has this really weird characteristic that apparently if you put it back into a closet for a couple of months, I guess, it'll return to its natural color, like the deep color it's supposed to be, but it didn't work after a couple days, and I don't know who keeps their paintings in closets. So for me, that doesn't really cut it. I had to kick it off my palette, very sadly, but it is still a beautiful color, and if light fastness isn't a concern for you, then you can still go ahead and add it to yours. I will let you know what I replaced it with, and that is Anthraquinone Blue from Imgram. This is PB60 and a color that we will be covering in the new series, but I just wanted to give you a little sneak peek there. This is much warmer than even the warmest of the Prussian Blues that I have here, but I find that it fills the same niche that I need for a deep blue, whereas I'll use a Phthalo Blue if I need something with a greener undertone. If you do want to keep Prussian Blue on your palette, I do recommend Da Vinci and Imgram's version. I think they're really nice, and they have served me well in the past. So real quick, before we move on to PV23, I realized that I did need to pull down the light fastness test to show you that result. So real quick, I wanted to show you that Prussian Blue I was talking about since I have it on hand now, and here it is. those aren't the same colors. This is the one that has been protected inside of a dark closet. This is the one that was in the window for 3 months. It faded to about this lightness in the first month and has stayed there ever since. But that is not the same thing. So next up, we're going to be looking at PV23. This is Dioxazine Violet, and this was the last episode in the original Color Spotlight run. It didn't get a whole lot of love, so if you want to go ahead and watch the episode, I'll put a card up there so you can go ahead and track over to it. But basically, we took a look at this color. I don't exactly remember because it's been a while since I myself have watched the video, but I know when I was researching for this, and ever since then, I know I've had conversations about people worried about the light fastness of this paint and how it's not, like it's not going to hold up and they don't even want it on their palettes and that kind of thing. And I have some interesting information for you because here are my light fastness tests. These on the right side have been sitting in the window for 3 months of sunny, south-facing window California weather. Even though it is winter, we still have plenty of sunny days here, and the south-facing window gets light pretty much all throughout the day. And I know 3 months isn't forever, and it's not like gonna stand the test of time forever and ever and ever, but you guys saw what happened in the M-gram sample. So if there was any concerns about that immediate, like people freak out about how this is so unlight fastness, if that were the case, we would have seen it. And there's almost no change in these samples. The only one that I can see a tiny bit of a change in is the Winsor & Newton Dioxazine Violet is slightly lighter in its mass tone. But even the Sennelier, which is this bottom one here, which is rated as a light fastness of 3, with 1 being the highest, there was no change over 3 months. So again, I know that's not forever, but for people who are like so terrified of this color because of the light fastness, they won't even add it on their palette. So I am interested in doing a video on our very strong and possibly unfounded fears of light fastness ratings on watercolors. But if you like this color and want to add it to your palette, I say do it. I don't think you have to worry about anything. Again, my favorite version is the Coors Dioxazine Violet, but if you want a warmer version with a little bit more red, there are plenty of others to choose from that are all great picks. Now, Dioxazine Violet was the last color of the original run, but it was not the last episode of Color Spotlight that I filmed. So if you haven't seen the Yellow Ochre Color Spotlight, it was part of a collaboration with Sade from Sadie Saves the Day, where we switched channels for the video. So it is in my Color Spotlight playlist, but you might not have seen it if you're not subscribed to her channel. So again, I'll go ahead and put a link up here. You can go ahead and check out that video, and we'll talk a little bit about that today here as well. Yellow ochre can be made from PY43 or PY42, and I've kind of put these, I know the rows aren't even, but these are basically the versions of the color that I like, and these are the colors that I do not like for various reasons. A lot of people have issues with the opacity of yellow ochre and that it can be really gross and muddy, and if you are talking about any of these colors, these 5 here, I would agree with you. These are really opaque, they're really chalky looking, and I wouldn't want to paint with them. Rembrandt is okay. It starts to get a little bit more opaque, and I wouldn't straight out say that I wouldn't paint with this one, but the real winners are up here on the top row. My absolute favorites are from Daniel Smith and Winsor & Newton. They have really beautiful, rich, almost brownish kind of yellow ochres that have a lot of transparency going for them. The yellow ochre from Winsor & Newton is probably the most vibrant of the group, but if you're looking for something more subtle, then Daniel Smith has a great one as well. Holbein has a nice transparent yellow variety, so if you're looking for something more yellow, we can go with that one. And also Colors of Nature has this beautiful kind of peachy version that is also pretty transparent for what it is. Yellow ochre is an absolute foundation on my palette because I do so many wildlife paintings. I can't paint without it. I tried to make a palette that explored some different color options and included some of my favorite colors but did not have a lighter earth tone like this, and painting after painting I was like, where's my yellow ochre? Where's my yellow ochre? So I have had to since add it back into that palette, and this is definitely a staple that I could not live without. So that is going to do it for my Color Spotlight update, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing the new samples that I have and hearing kind of where the colors stand in my palettes today. We are going to be back next week with the start of the new Color Spotlight run, and I will list the colors that we're going to be talking about in the description below if you want a little bit of a sneak peek. If you want to keep it a surprise, I would recommend not looking down in the description below so that you don't spoil it for yourself, but I am excited to go ahead and bring those to you. Let me know in the comments below what colors you are most excited to see in the new run, and if you had any thoughts about the colors we talked about today, whether or not they are essentials on your palette, I would love to hear that from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, for liking the video if you enjoyed the content, for commenting down below to add to the discussion, and for subscribing if you'd like to see more content. I will see you in the next video.